meats and cheeses, the best cannoli, lobster tails, and biscotti outside of Naples. Prepared foods made in small quantities so it's fresh every day. Catering for all occasions available and 2 private rooms for up to 120 guests. Ristorante Roma is open every Friday and Saturday. Call 331-5000 for catering or reservations. At Roma, every day you are treated like family.
You wouldn't want your meal shipped from another continent. Why would you want your favorite radio station streamed from across the globe? That's why AM 790 created a super cool app that not only allows you to stream our best shows and music, but it also gives you access to great local deals like half off top restaurants, concerts, and more. Just go to 790business.com and download our groovy cool app. Keep it local, keep it simple, keep it connected with 790business.com.
Now, back to the Coalition on AM 790 Talk and Business. Join in the conversation at 437-5000 or 888-345-0790.
And yes, we are back. Coalition Radio on AM 790, your source for news and business. Welcome back. Of course, you can find us on Facebook.com/Coalition Radio and on the mighty Twitter, Coalition_radio. Thanks to our production team for our new music this week. Anti-Flag is sort of the new theme song, if you will, of Coalition Radio, and a little bit of Public Enemy at the top of the show. We are, of course, honored again to have attorney Robert Mann with us. A little background, if you will, on the attorney, graduate of Yale University Law School, Yale Law Review. He practices before just about every court known to man, even ones I hadn't heard of. He has argued before the Supreme Court of the United States. He is the preeminent criminal lawyer in this state. He is also, as I would put him, and I say this with great admiration, sort of one of the patron saints, if you will, of lost causes in the state, advocating for people for whom the system has forgotten or has chosen to ignore or has chosen to vilify before the time-honored role, if you will, of innocent until presumed guilty. When we last were speaking, we were talking about the court system in general. Attorney Mann, you had sort of a comment, a thought that you wanted to share with us.
I just think there would be an enormous benefit to the state if we could reduce the prison population significantly. It would free up resources that could be used for other things, or just reduce the burden on the economic burden on the state. We just over incarcerate, not just in this state but around the country. And there's an incredible economic gain to be realized by decreasing the size of the prison population, in addition to all the moral reasons for cutting down the prison population.
And that seems to be the general consensus among a lot of people out there, is that we need to reduce the prison population to save some money. Unfortunately, Rhode Island is moving at this point to criminalize a whole group of people through House Bill 5192, which is lovingly called the Highway Blocking Bill here in Rhode Island, sponsored by Representative Raymond Hull, who is, in fact, a former police officer. Which is not surprising. But this bill would basically charge anybody or give anybody a mandatory 6-month sentence for blocking highways, intentionally or willfully. I forget exactly how the bill is worded. And on the Senate side, in the General Assembly, the mirrored legislation is being sponsored by serial health code violator, Senator Lou Raptakis. Mm-hmm. But we wanted to have Attorney Mann in today to give us his thoughts on this bill. I went up to the State House this week and gave my thoughts on the bill. And basically what it came down to for me was this bill is the legislative equivalent of your doctor telling you that you have lung cancer, and then he prescribes you some Dimetap for the cough. It is a treatment of a symptom rather than an underlying disease, which makes it a reactionary bill rather than a precautionary bill. So, Attorney Mann, if you could chime in and give us your thoughts on this really, really terrible bill.
Well, I took a look at the Senate bill. That's the one I have a copy of. Let's just start by saying that we need fewer laws that have mandatory minimums, not more laws that have mandatory minimums. We don't need, as a general matter, I think a lot of people in the criminal justice system think that you don't need mandatory minimums. What mandatory minimums do is they restrict the ability of a judge to make an appropriate decision. They skew plea bargaining, and whether the mandatory minimum is 6 months in the House bill, which I haven't seen, or the Senate bill where it's 60 days, you just don't need mandatory minimums. You've got judges that...
I'm sorry. It was 60 days in the House side, yeah.
You just don't need mandatory minimums. But the real fear of a bill like this is two things. One is it escalates the crime from a misdemeanor to a felony. And I worry enormously about how much of a chill that will have on the willingness of people to protest.
Yes.
The second problem, another major problem that I see with the bill, is I worry about the fact that there doesn't seem to be a clear standard for when the new statute would be invoked versus the old statute. I mean, they'll talk about the difference between the term highway and street, but I'm not sure that's clearly spelled out in the statute. But I worry about when will law enforcement decide to invoke this more serious statute, and who will be the people that they use it against. And I worry there that we go back to the conversation we had a few minutes ago, that the people that will be used against are the poor, are minorities, are the people least able to defend themselves against the police. Whatever your views about interfering with traffic and all that, we have enough resources in the criminal justice system to address that. We've got a disorderly conduct statute that works well, and people have to understand that if you get arrested on disorderly conduct and you're given 6 months probation and you get arrested a second time, the judge clearly can send you to jail. They can send you to jail the first time. So we don't need these additional resources. We also don't need to stigmatize more people with a felony conviction unless there's some compelling reason. And I just really hope the legislature will realize that we already have the tools in place to allow law enforcement to protect society. That this bill has the danger, I think, of really chilling expression, creating sort of standardless creating a situation where law enforcement won't have clear standards about when to use this more serious charge. There are real concerns I have about this bill.
And I think you're right that taking the discretion away from the judge in the case and basically putting it in the hands of the prosecutor skews the process, because, frankly, the prosecutor and the police are working on the same team.
There's some specific language in this bill that I find troubling as someone who's not an expert, who just tries to play one on the radio. The law tries to clearly state that the action has to intentionally, knowingly, or recklessly interfere with traffic. How do you define those kind of concepts without being arbitrary?
Well, I mean, I think intentionally is a long history of being described. I mean, in the law, all these terms have a long history. And there are legal cases that will explain them. I'm very troubled by the use of the term recklessly. That seems to imply some degree of mental state that doesn't require an intent, okay? And I'm enormously troubled by the prospect, you hit on one of the key points, I'm enormously troubled by the prospect of creating a felony where your state of mind is recklessness. I think that's a really dangerous step to go down. I hope that we don't go down that step. I hope that the legislature, I hope they don't pass this bill, but I hope if they do, they take out this recklessly. I mean, we don't have any. You can only imagine how that might end up being applied.
They also talk about the notion of a state or federal highway on a very practical level. Outside of I-95 and I-295, could the average person, and this goes back to your comment about a chilling effect on protesting or civil disobedience, could the average person define what actually constitutes a state or federal highway? I mean, Mineral Spring Avenue, technically,
it's a state highway.
It's a state highway.
Yeah. As is Smith Street.
Right. And so when you see this type of vagueness written into a bill, do you think it's intentional, and what do you think the side effects are?
I don't know what. I mean, I assume this bill was drafted in response to the recent protests.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I assume people intended to draft a good bill. I hope that when they reconsider, they'll realize they don't need a new bill, that they don't need new legislation. I think the side effects are that it will chill protest. I think that's the real danger, okay? One of the real dangers. I think if people think that they might get charged with a felony. I think the danger is that will make people more reluctant to protest. And we have a long history in this country of civil disobedience playing a real role in changing policies, changing the way our country operates.
It's kind of, frankly, the only thing that actually gets things done as far as...
Well, sometimes, and I'm not sure that I agree with interfering with highways in most cases. I probably disagree on a political basis with efforts to recently close down the highway. That's just a personal political disagreement. But I don't think you need to turn it into a felony. And I think the danger is that this will give law enforcement the opportunity, they may not even want it, by the way, to turn some people into felons. It's not clear to me that law enforcement would necessarily favor this bill.
When this week when I was at House Judiciary, there was the only person that was there from law enforcement in support of the bill was somebody from the police union. There's nobody there from the AG's office, nobody there from the state police, and I think that to me was telling. If the Attorney General and state police aren't here throwing their weight behind this bill, that should be indicative of hey, maybe we should slow down on this and think about it a little bit.
The bottom line is we don't need this bill.
Well, and one of your colleagues, Andrew Horowitz from Roger Williams, said basically that. He said the disorderly conduct statute that we have in the state right now has a provision for people who block roads.
And in fact, in the bill, as it was submitted to the Senate version, they literally have highlight crossing out highway and creating a separate codicil, if you will, for highways. Yet at the same time, the definition of said highway is so loosey-goosey, if you will, that everyone who decides to take up a placard to protest whatever is germane to them individually, including members of the political right, Tea Party members and people like that. What's fascinating to me is that ultimately some of the people who, as a knee-jerk emotional response, support this type of legislation could, in fact, be the targets of it at some point in time if political winds are such that they don't favor their cause.
Well, and you just pointed out another problem with the statute. Because of the way the statute's drafted, they've taken the word highway out of the misdemeanor part of the statute and put it in the felony part of the statute. One of the questions I have, and I wouldn't presume to know the answer to this, is are they saying now that you can't be charged with disorderly conduct for obstructing a highway, and is that going to force law enforcement to charge people with a felony or not charge them at all? And one of the things we don't have is a clear definition of highway versus street, and I think that's another big question.
Well, and doesn't this open the door for multiple charges being brought against somebody? Well, hey, we're going to charge you under the disorderly conduct statute as a misdemeanor, and we're going to hit you with this felony.
Well, they may do that, and there'll be all kinds of legal issues that the statute raises. What's a lesser included offense? Will one be exclusive of the other? You can see lots of different legal issues, but at the bottom line is what you've done is you've got a perfectly fine disorderly conduct statute, or not, it functions anyway. There are issues with the disorderly conduct statute we could revisit another time.
Yeah.
But you've got a functioning disorderly conduct statute, and now you're trying to turn that misdemeanor statute into creating a felony analog, and you don't need it, and it's just going to hurt people.
You've served a lifetime in the community as I mentioned earlier, and I say this with respect, I hope you know that, as sort of one of the attorneys who support a lot of lost causes. A lot of politically very unpopular cases, which clearly call for a true defense lawyer. And this is the ironic part: the same people who allege to be constitutionalists would deny the function, the reason for the existence of having a defense lawyer, which is to provide the best possible defense to everyone, regardless of presumed innocence or guilt. With that in mind, you've served a lifetime and seen firsthand the effect of the misdemeanor versus the felony. Go into as much detail as you want about how that's affected individual lives.
The collateral consequences of a criminal conviction are so enormous. They affect, for immigrants, it's an enormous effect. The danger of being removed from this country. For people who aren't immigrants, probably the biggest collateral consequence is jobs, but there are lots of other collateral consequences. It can affect your ability, for example, to get a security clearance, which can affect your ability to get a job. It can affect your ability in family court proceedings and